Hey folks, Will here again with Happily Ever Outdoors. So in this video, we're gonna give you 5 quick knife safety tips. So keep watching. All right guys, so whether you are a hiker, backpacker, bushcrafter, or anyone who happens to be unfortunate enough to get lost in the woods, a knife can be your very best friend. But it can also be your worst enemy and one of the most common causes of injury in the woods if you're either an inexperienced beginner or somebody who just fails to exercise some safe practices. So tip number 1 is going to be to start small. You don't need a huge, crazy, outlandish design, just something basic, simple, straightforward so you can get familiar with handling a knife. If you're looking for something a little more tactical, the Gerber Strong Arm could be a good way to go. Another good example would be the Condor Bush Lore, which is an affordable design. It's very popular. A lot of people vouch for it. I don't own one personally, but I certainly wouldn't hesitate to recommend it. No matter what you end up choosing, the point is just to start with something that's simple, small, and easy to manage. That way, when you start messing with large blades, exotics, and oversized machetes, you're going to be comfortable with handling a sharp piece of steel. Tip number 2 is going to be to wear protective gear whenever necessary. This could include leather work gloves as well as protective eyewear. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. These are just basic leather work gloves. If you wanted something a little more maneuverable, you could go with a nicer pair of like tactical type gloves. And it's definitely advisable to always wear safety glasses if you're doing any kind of heavy chopping with a large knife or a machete, or using an axe, anything like that. Honestly, I'm not always the best about it myself, but I'm trying to get better. It's one of those things where you may get away with it 99% of the time, but that 1% when you end up getting something stuck in your eye, you're gonna know it. Now, as far as the sturdy gloves are concerned, not only are they gonna help keep your hands from getting ate up when you're doing heavier work, when you're really carving and things like that, it's gonna help keep you from getting blisters, but also if you have that slip of a knife that ends up hitting the back of your hand, something along those lines, it's gonna make a difference of you might get a little bit of a bruise or a little bit of a scare or having a large laceration on your hand that could put you in the hospital and cause permanent damage to the use of your hand. Tip number 3 is going to be to always cut away from yourself. Whenever you're handling a knife, just remember there's generally only one side as well as the tip that can actually hurt you. So make sure you're working that in the opposite direction of your body. This means if you're carving a stick, you should never be pulling back towards yourself. You should always be pushing away. And along with that, make sure whatever hand you're using to hold on to that stick or whatever that you're cutting on, you don't put your fingers to where they're going to be in front of that cutting edge. If you're using a heavier knife doing some kind of chopping, make sure you always stay clear of your shins, your knees, your feet, all that good stuff. And always be mindful to never put yourself in a position where if that knife slips or you miss that chop, you'll end up hurting yourself. Tip number 4, put it away. Now, I'm sure at some point growing up, all of us can remember either our mom or our dad or maybe our teacher telling us not to run with scissors. Why? Because you'll fall and stab yourself. So this is a really basic principle, but I think sometimes the more familiar with knives, you can actually run into setting these bad habits of not putting your knife away when it's not in use. So it's definitely smart to start training yourself early on. And this really holds true whether we're talking about a smaller knife, a large knife, or even an axe or a folding saw. If it's put up, it can't hurt you or anybody else. So don't leave your tools laying open around the campsite whenever possible, and most certainly do not carry your tools open walking through the woods. All it takes is one stumble, 1 second, and you might have a life-threatening injury way out in the woods far from medical help. And while we're on the subject, this is just a bonus tip, but you should always carry a good first aid kit with you just in case. And lastly, we have tip number 5, which is to keep your knives sharp. Now, this may seem a little funny, it may not seem like a knife safety tip. After all, a sharp knife could be more dangerous, right? Not really. Now, of course, if we're comparing a samurai sword to a butter knife, the rule doesn't quite work out, but generally speaking, a dull knife is actually more dangerous. Because, of course, the more pressure you're having to use to cut and to carve with that knife, when it slips, that's going to be more force that you're going to have to try to stop, and that's how injuries happen. There's a lot of products out there to help you with this, such as a basic sharpening stone, all-in-one sharpener, and ceramic honing rods. But when it comes to sharpening, really, knowledge and practice are far more important than necessarily the tools you're using to accomplish the task. So take your time, do some research. There's a lot of great books out there. There's a lot of great YouTube videos giving you step-by-step tutorials on how to sharpen all kinds of different knives, different sizes, different types of grinds. Now, you don't have to be the greatest, most skilled knife sharpener in the world, but if you're gonna own a knife, you need to learn how to properly sharpen one. Alright guys, I hope these 5 beginner knife safety tips were helpful to you. If they were, we would love it if you'd give us a thumbs up. While you're at it, if you're not already subscribed to our channel, I hope you'll do so today so you can keep seeing more videos like this. Until next time, stay happy, stay outdoors.